The moment the mysterious man stepped forward, the atmosphere across the shattered bridge changed completely. His long coat swayed behind him as he walked through the battlefield without hesitation. Blood dripped from the weapon in his hand, yet his expression remained calm. The survivors could only stare in shock as he emerged from the light, his golden eyes glowing beneath the shadows of his face. Even Kim Dokja froze. The stranger's presence alone felt overwhelming. As the man stopped near the corpse of Kim Namwon, Dokja couldn't help questioning who he was. The situation felt absurd. Was he really expected to confront someone like this? His instinct screamed that it was impossible. Desperate for answers, Dokja activated Character List. A system window immediately appeared, but instead of providing the usual information, it warned that the target contained far too much data. The skill automatically converted into a simplified summary. For the first time, Dokja saw a glimpse of the man's identity. His name was Yoo Jung-hyuk. The summary alone was enough to leave Dokja speechless. Countless abilities filled the screen, far beyond anything he had encountered so far. Before he could even process the information, Yoo Jung-hyuk moved. A hand shot forward like lightning. Dokja felt powerful fingers clamp around his throat. The attack came so quickly that he couldn't react. A violent force lifted him from the ground as Yoo Jung-hyuk stared at him with cold, unreadable eyes. Dokja choked and struggled for air while the man held him effortlessly, as though evaluating whether he was worth killing. Against that overwhelming strength, Dokja realized just how enormous the gap between them truly was. Yoo Jung-hyuk's grip tightened around Kim Dokja's throat as he stared at him with cold disbelief. He wanted to know how Kim Dokja was still alive. To most people, the ruined world had descended into chaos without warning. But according to the knowledge Kim Dokja carried, there had always been a single method to survive in this world. The person who had proven that method through countless hardships stood right in front of him. Yoo Jung-hyuk, the man known as the Regressor. The man whose existence was tied to the greatest tragedy of this ruined world. Far away from the confrontation, the remaining survivors were still struggling with their own problems. The soldier pressed his hand against the glowing barrier blocking the subway entrance, but no matter what he tried, he couldn't see a way through. The strange wall remained intact, refusing to let anyone pass. The woman looked toward the bridge with growing concern, worried about Dokja as the young boy stood silently beside her. Meanwhile, the shattered bridge groaned beneath the weight of destruction. Massive concrete supports continued to crumble, sending rocks and debris crashing into the river below. Back on the battlefield, Yoo Jung-hyuk ignored everything else. He demanded only one thing: Dokja's name. For a moment, Dokja was caught off guard. Of all the questions he expected, that was not one of them. Yet Yoo Jung-hyuk calmly repeated himself, making it clear he wanted an answer. Even while struggling to breathe, Dokja couldn't help thinking that the man's attitude perfectly matched the protagonist he remembered. Finally, he gave his name. Kim Dokja. Yoo Jung-hyuk repeated it quietly. An unusual name. Dokja could only respond that he heard that often. The brief exchange ended instantly. Without warning, Yoo Jung-hyuk slammed him backward with overwhelming force. The impact exploded across the broken ground as Dokja's body was hurled through the air, making it painfully clear that the gap between them was still enormous. Yoo Jung-hyuk had accepted his answer, but that didn't mean he had lowered his guard for even a second. Kim Dokja struggled to catch his breath as Yoo Jung-hyuk's hand remained locked around his throat. Instead of killing him immediately, Yoo Jung-hyuk studied him carefully. His sharp eyes seemed to evaluate every detail before he finally remarked that Dokja possessed an unusually sturdy body. More importantly, he noticed that Dokja already understood how to use coins. Dokja managed a strained response, pointing out that the same could be said about Yoo Jung-hyuk. The answer earned him no sympathy. A brutal blow crashed into his body, sending pain exploding through his ribs. Dokja barely managed to stay conscious as he realized just how terrifying the man standing before him truly was. They had only survived a handful of scenarios so far, yet Yoo Jung-hyuk had already become monstrously powerful. It was enough to make Dokja think of him as an outright monster. Yu Jung-hyuk showed no interest in conversation. He coldly warned Dokja not to waste his breath. From that point onward, he would answer questions and nothing more. Dokja immediately recognized the danger of the situation. This was the worst possible version of Yu Jung-hyuk to encounter. Among all the people in the ruined world, Yu Jung-hyuk was at his most dangerous during the early stages. His repeated regressions had twisted his personality, and in his current state, there was almost nothing he wouldn't do if it helped him achieve his goals. When Yu Jung-hyuk demanded an answer, Dokja reluctantly agreed, at least on the surface. But when Yu Jung-hyuk warned him to watch his tongue, Dokja calmly refused. The atmosphere instantly became hostile. Yu Jung-hyuk's fist clenched. A moment later, another devastating strike shot toward Dokja. This time, however, Dokja was ready. He intercepted the attack at the last second, catching Yu Jung-hyuk's wrist before the blow could land. For the first time, a flicker of surprise appeared in Yu Jung-hyuk's eyes. Dokja used that brief opening to speak. With a faint grin despite the pain and exhaustion, if anyone needed to watch their tongue, he said, it was Yu Jung-hyuk. A notification suddenly appeared before Kim Dokja's eyes. Yu Jung-hyuk had become wary of him. That reaction alone confirmed that his gamble had worked. When Yu Jung-hyuk demanded to know how he recognized him, Dokja answered with a carefully crafted lie. He claimed that he worked for a game company and knew of Yu Jung-hyuk's reputation from there. In reality, the truth was far stranger. Yu Jung-hyuk wasn't someone he had learned about through work. He was a character from a story that Dokja had followed for years. Still, not everything he said was false. He truly had been a fan. Over countless chapters, he had watched Yu Jung-hyuk's journey unfold. There had been times when he admired him, times when he hated him, times when he resented his decisions, and times when he cheered for his victories. Through every triumph and every disaster, Dokja had remained by his side as a reader. For 3,000 chapters, he had witnessed everything. The answer seemed to affect Yu Jung-hyuk more than expected. The word fan made him pause. It was a word he apparently hadn't heard in a very long time. After a brief silence, Yu Jung-hyuk loosened his hostility slightly. He said he would overlook Dokja's insolence for now, though that didn't change the reality of his situation. Dokja was still at his mercy. Standing on the edge of the shattered bridge with the evening sky burning behind them, Yu Jung-hyuk made it clear that he only had one question. How had Dokja survived inside the subway? The moment the question was asked, Dokja understood everything. That was what Yu Jung-hyuk had wanted all along. Trying to buy time, Dokja asked whether answering would spare his life. Yu Jung-hyuk's response was vague. Maybe. Dokja immediately recognized it for what it was. A lie. There was no guarantee that Yu Jung-hyuk would let him live after getting the answer he wanted. Kim Dokja could tell immediately that Yu Jung-hyuk wasn't convinced. As the only person who had read the entire story, Dokja could practically read the thoughts behind that expression. Convincing a regressor like Yu Jung-hyuk would never be easy. At that moment, a notification suddenly appeared before him. His understanding of Yu Jung-hyuk had increased. Then another message followed, stating that his understanding of the character was already extremely high. Dokja barely had time to process the information before a new system window appeared. The conditions for activating an exclusive skill had finally been met. The skill was called Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint. Before he could react, the skill activated. The world around him shifted. Suddenly, foreign thoughts flooded into his mind. Only Lee Hyun-sung and Kim Nam-won should have survived in that compartment. Yet Kim Nam-won was dead, while several other people had somehow lived. Who was this man standing before him? How had he changed the outcome? The thoughts continued relentlessly. Yu Jung-hyuk wanted answers. And if Kim Dokja became an obstacle, he would eliminate him without hesitation. The realization sent a chill down Dokja's spine. He was hearing Yu Jung-hyuk's actual thoughts, just like what had happened with Kim Nam-won before. For a brief moment, a smile tugged at Dokja's lips. The skill was real. The timer hovering above the battlefield showed only 5 minutes remaining. Faced with Yu Jung-hyuk's suspicion, Dokja finally answered. He claimed that he had survived through luck. According to his explanation, an explosion in a previous compartment had led him to discover a bug cage hidden by a child, allowing him to clear the scenario. Yu Jung-hyuk's eyes narrowed. The answer clearly wasn't what he had expected. The future he knew had already begun to diverge. In the original flow of events, Kim Namwon and Lee Hyun-sung should have been the survivors of the battle royale in the train. Instead, the entire situation had unfolded differently. The change was large enough to leave even Yu Jung-hyuk visibly shaken, and that reaction alone told Kim Dokja just how much the future had already started slipping away from the path Yu Jung-hyuk remembered. Through Omniscient Reader's viewpoint, Kim Dokja continued peering into Yu Jung-hyuk's thoughts. The regressor was analyzing every detail of his story. An explosion, dead passengers, a hidden bug cage. Even after hearing the explanation, Yu Jung-hyuk remained unconvinced. From his perspective, too many things didn't add up. Kim Dokja was far too calm for someone experiencing the apocalypse for the first time. He had adapted to the changing world with unnatural speed. The more Yu Jung-hyuk thought about it, the more suspicious Dokja became. A darker conclusion soon followed. Yu Jung-hyuk was beginning to suspect that Kim Dokja himself had killed Kim Namwon. The thought wasn't entirely hostile. He admitted that Dokja could be useful, but usefulness didn't erase danger. In Yu Jung-hyuk's eyes, Kim Dokja was becoming both. Trying to steer the situation in a safer direction, Dokja forced a smile and suggested that they continue talking while heading toward Oksu Station. The timer was running out, and every second mattered. Unfortunately, Yu Jung-hyuk wasn't interested. His grip tightened. Everything about Dokja's story felt too convenient. Then a spark of golden light flashed across Yu Jung-hyuk's eye. The moment Kim Dokja saw it, his heart nearly stopped. Eye of Sage, Yu Jung-hyuk's powerful detection skill. A skill capable of revealing a person's attributes, abilities, and hidden information. In terms of gathering information, it was one of the strongest abilities in existence. Dokja had actually been wondering why Yu Jung-hyuk hadn't used it already. Now he finally had. Oddly enough, instead of panicking, Kim Dokja felt a spark of excitement. This might actually work in his favor. Even he didn't fully understand his own attribute or the skills he possessed. If Yu Jung-hyuk examined him with Eye of Sage, Dokja might learn something about himself as well. Of course, it meant exposing his secrets to one of the most dangerous people alive. But the opportunity was too valuable to ignore. If he could gain information about himself, the risk might be worth taking. Having made his decision, Kim Dokja prepared himself. Then a blue system window suddenly appeared before him. The exclusive skill fourth wall had been activated. The moment Eye of Sage activated, another system message immediately appeared before Kim Dokja. Fourth wall had detected the detection skill. Before he could even react, a violent surge of energy erupted. Blue and golden lightning exploded around Yu Jung-hyuk's eyes. The regressor staggered in shock, as if something had struck him directly. For the first time since their encounter began, genuine confusion crossed Yu Jung-hyuk's face. Kim Dokja stared in disbelief. Even Yu Jung-hyuk couldn't understand what had just happened. Then another notification appeared. Fourth wall had completely blocked Eye of Sage. The revelation hit both of them at once. Yu Jung-hyuk's expression twisted with frustration. Veins bulged across his face as he gritted his teeth and glared at Dokja. Something had prevented one of his most reliable skills from functioning. Something that should have been impossible. His grip tightened around Dokja's throat. Bastard. The word slipped out through clenched teeth. For the first time, Yu Jung-hyuk looked genuinely unsettled. His eyes narrowed as he demanded to know who Kim Dokja really was. Before Dokja could answer, a familiar blue window suddenly flashed into view. The sub-scenario information appeared once more. Cross the broken bridge. Reach Oksu Station. Reward, 200 coins. Failure, unknown. But one detail immediately caught Dokja's attention. The remaining time. Only 2 minutes and 14 seconds were left. The deadline was almost upon them. Yet neither man moved. The battle of information had become more important than the scenario itself. Kim Dokja could hardly believe what had just happened. The realization struck him harder than Yu Jung-hyuk's grip around his throat. No way. He actually possessed a skill capable of blocking Eye of Sage. First there had been Bookmark and now Fourth Wall. The mysterious abilities kept revealing themselves one after another, each more unbelievable than the last. Unfortunately, that discovery came at the worst possible moment. Yu Jung-hyuk's expression had completely changed. The confusion was gone. What remained was pure hostility. His golden eyes glowed ominously as murderous intent surged through him. In his mind, he had already reached a conclusion. Kim Dokja needed to die. Seeing that look, Dokja immediately understood how serious the situation had become. Yu Jung-hyuk would never trust him now. He needed a new approach. Fast. The remaining time for the scenario was rapidly disappearing, and there was no chance of surviving what came next alone. Forcing himself to stay calm despite the hand crushing his throat, Dokja spoke. Yu Jung-hyuk needed allies. The fourth scenario couldn't be cleared by a single person. Surely someone who had survived countless regressions already knew that. The words caused Yu Jung-hyuk to pause. A hint of suspicion crossed his face. How could a complete stranger know something like that? For a brief moment, he wondered whether Kim Dokja might be something impossible. Another returner. But the idea didn't fit. If someone had returned alongside him, he would have known. There was no way another regressor could exist without his knowledge. Then what exactly was this man? Kim Dokja met his gaze. Still struggling for air, he spoke carefully. He told Yu Jung-hyuk that he knew things. Things the regressor himself didn't know. The future he had never seen. For the first time, Yu Jung-hyuk's composure cracked. His glowing eye widened. Immediately, another skill activated. Lie detection. A notification appeared as the ability examined Kim Dokja's words. Dokja's heart pounded as he waited. Then the verdict arrived. He had spoken the truth. Yu Jung-hyuk stood frozen for a brief moment. The result from lie detection refused to fit into anything he knew. A strange possibility surfaced in his mind. Could there really be another clairvoyant in Korea besides Anna Croft? Clairvoyants were extraordinarily rare. In a ruined world, they possessed a unique trait that allowed them to glimpse the future while naturally resisting inspection abilities. Only a single known character possessed such a gift. Looking at Kim Dokja, Yu Jung-hyuk began to wonder if he had found another. When he asked whether Dokja could see the future, Dokja answered carefully. Something like that. If he truly knew the future, then he must have known Yu Jung-hyuk would arrive here. Dokja calmly confirmed it. Then he explained a flaw in Yu Jung-hyuk's assumptions. Returners could relive their lives and know future events. But every action they took altered the timeline. The moment they changed the present, the future itself began to change. The further they deviated, the less reliable their knowledge became. That was where Dokja claimed he could help. He possessed information Yu Jung-hyuk lacked, knowledge that could fill the gaps created by an uncertain future. He urged Yu Jung-hyuk to work with him. After all, a person who could see what lay ahead would be an invaluable ally. Of course, Dokja kept the real truth to himself. The reason he knew so much wasn't because he could see the future. It was because he had been the only reader of this story. The proposal caused Yu Jung-hyuk to hesitate. A faint smile appeared on his face as he considered the possibilities. If Kim Dokja truly possessed abilities similar to a clairvoyant, he could become a powerful asset, not only for the upcoming fourth scenario, but for future battles as well. Yet a more important question remained. Could he be trusted? The seconds continued slipping away. A notification announced that only 50 seconds remained before the scenario ended. Still gripping Dokja by the throat, Yu Jung-hyuk fell into thought. Then another warning appeared. 40 seconds remained. The sunset stretched across the ruined bridge as silence settled between them. Yu Jung-hyuk finally reached a decision. With only seconds remaining, he chose not to kill Kim Dokja. Instead, he declared that Dokja would become his ally. Before Dokja could even celebrate, Yu Jung-hyuk dragged him forward by the collar and sprinted toward the glowing bridge of light. Dokja nearly choked as he was pulled across the tracks. The bridge ahead wasn't an ordinary structure. A notification identified it as the Deus Ex Machina, the Even Bridge. It was a bridge materialized through the protection of a constellation. However, only an even number of people could cross it safely. If an odd number attempted to pass, the bridge would instantly disappear. On the opposite side, Han Suyong's group anxiously watched and waited. None of them knew what had happened to Dakja. Back on the bridge, Yu Junghye continued pulling him forward without a word. Dakja struggled to keep up. Despite everything, relief flooded through him. He had survived. Somehow, against all odds, he had managed to convince the paranoid regressor. At the same time, a new problem emerged. The strain of using Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint had pushed him beyond his limits. System messages appeared one after another. Due to excessive concentration, he was suffering from severe fatigue. The exclusive skill Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint was deactivating. Dakja could feel his body growing heavier with every step. Still, none of that mattered right now. He had accomplished the most important objective. He had successfully formed an alliance with Yu Junghye and crossed the bridge alive. This was enough. For now, surviving was victory. Yu Junghye wasn't finished testing him. As they reached the end of the bridge, he tightened his grip on Dakja's collar and asked one final question. If Dakja truly possessed the clairvoyant ability he claimed to have, then he should know his own future as well. The moment those words left Yu Junghye's mouth, a terrible feeling ran down Dakja's spine. His instinct screamed that something was wrong. Then the answer appeared. A gigantic sea monster burst from the water below with a thunderous roar, sending waves crashing into the bridge. Its enormous jaws opened wide beneath them. At the worst possible moment, Yu Junghye calmly presented a choice. Would he drop Dakja? Or wouldn't he? Dakja wanted to scream. This insane regressor was actually using a giant monster attack as part of an interrogation. Even with death looming beneath them, Yu Junghye's expression remained completely emotionless. Dakja clenched his teeth. He knew Yu Junghye better than anyone. He had followed the man's journey through 3,000 chapters. If there was anyone in the world who could predict what Yu Junghye would do next, it was him. Taking a deep breath, Dakja decided to speak. First, he wanted to be treated as an equal from this point onward. Second, he wanted Yu Junghye's cooperation just as much as Yu Junghye expected his. The declaration hung in the air while the monster roared below and the sunset burned across the horizon. For a brief moment, neither man spoke. One was the protagonist who had survived countless regressions. The other was the sole reader who knew the entire story. And for the first time, they were beginning to negotiate not as enemies, but as partners, even if neither of them fully trusted the other yet. Yu Junghye finally asked for Dakja's answer. Dakja, exhausted from being dragged around by the collar and threatened with death every few seconds, snapped back without hesitation. Let go already and screw off, asshole. For a split second, silence filled the air. Then Yu Junghye released him. Not gently. He simply let go. Dakja's eyes widened in horror as his body slipped backward off the edge of the bridge. A scream tore from his throat while he plummeted toward the raging water below. At the top of the bridge, Yu Junghye stood calmly watching him fall. Then, to Dakja's complete disbelief, the regressor smiled. A genuine smile. I'll trust you, Yu Junghye said. You definitely are clairvoyant. The realization hit Dakja immediately. That lunatic had been testing him the entire time, and now he was falling straight into the jaws of a sea monster. Below him, the enormous creature opened its mouth wide enough to swallow him whole. Rows of massive teeth surrounded him from every direction as he dropped deeper and deeper into the beast's throat. Dakja stared at the monster's mouth and cursed. Son of a bitch. The jaws snapped shut around him. A system message immediately appeared before his eyes. He had failed to clear the scenario. Dakja plunged deeper into darkness, surrounded by rushing water and the remains of everything the sea monster had swallowed over the years. His body slammed into a torrent flowing through the creature's stomach. Every muscle screamed in pain. The fatigue from using his skills, the injuries from the scenario, and the fall itself were pushing him toward unconsciousness. This is bad. He clenched his teeth. If he blacked out now, he would die. A moment later, he crashed into the monster's stomach chamber with a tremendous splash. Water surged around him as he fought his way to the surface, coughing violently. To his relief, he was still alive. The monster's massive teeth hadn't shredded him on the way down. Looks like I managed to get to the stomach without getting torn apart. Dakja activated the flashlight on his phone and raised it high. The beam illuminated a horrifying sight. Bodies, broken pieces of vehicles, trash, bones. The stomach was practically an underwater graveyard filled with everything the creature had consumed. Dakja stared at the scene and forced a bitter smile. Wow, what a sight. Damn it. Of course this was where he ended up. Meanwhile, above the water, he couldn't stop thinking about Yu Jung-hyuk. That damned psychopath had nearly strangled him to death, thrown him off a bridge, and somehow called that an alliance. Now he understood Yu Jung-hyuk a little better. Since failing his very first regression, Jung-hyuk had never truly known what it meant to have an ally. As the strongest survivor, people either worshipped him as a savior or feared him as a monster. No one stood beside him as an equal. Over time, that isolation became part of who he was. To Yu Jung-hyuk, other people fell into only two categories: subordinates or enemies, nothing in between. So this was a test. If Dakja truly wanted Jung-hyuk to recognize him as an equal, then he had to solve this situation himself. One asshole. Taking a deep breath, Dakja opened the message logs. A series of blue windows immediately appeared. You have failed to clear the scenario. Beginning payment calculation. 100 coins have been deducted for the channel commission. Constellation Prisoner of the Golden Circlet approves of your decisive words. You have been sponsored 100 coins. Constellation Diabolical Arbiter of Flame approves of your decision. You have been sponsored 100 coins. Constellation Veiled Conspirator is disappointed by your imprudent words. Dakja stared silently at the notifications. Even after failing, the constellations were still watching, still judging, still paying. Before he could think further, the water around him suddenly trembled. The sea serpent had begun to move. Waves crashed against the stomach walls, nearly knocking him from his perch. According to the novel, sea serpents release their stomach acid roughly 3 hours after swallowing prey, which meant he didn't have much time left. Then golden sparks crackled through the darkness. A familiar voice echoed inside the chamber. Haha, well, this is a shame. It was getting really interesting. Dakja turned. An imp materialized in a burst of light. Imp, the small horned creature grinned. Yep, that's me. Huh, but you don't seem too worried. Because I was waiting for you. The imp blinked. Dakja wasn't surprised at all. In fact, he had expected this meeting. The creature before him wasn't just some random bystander. It was exactly the person he needed if he wanted to survive what came next. Dakja looked up at the darkness above him and made a silent promise. Watch me, Yu Jung-hyuk. Not only would he survive this nightmare, but he would also obtain something powerful enough to stand beside the regressor as an equal. Only then would Yu Jung-hyuk have no choice but to truly acknowledge him as an ally. The imp floated nearby, staring curiously. You were waiting for me? Yeah. Dakja nodded calmly. You need to collect coins from me, don't you? The imp tilted its head. Coins, you say? I failed the scenario. So you need to collect coins as payment. The creature's eyes widened with interest. And not your life. Dakja immediately shook his head. If it cost my life, it would have said so in the failure condition. He pulled up the scenario window in front of him. The message clearly displayed. Upon failure. Not death. Not execution. Just question marks. Which means there's room for negotiation, right? For a moment, silence filled the sea serpent's stomach. Then the imp burst into laughter. Ha ha! How interesting. Amazing. You figure out all that from such an insignificant clue. As expected of the incarnation, the constellations are watching. Then it grinned. As you said, you could survive a failed sub-scenario by paying coins. Dakja felt a flicker of relief. For a second, give me 5,000 coins. The smile instantly vanished from his face. 5,000 coins! A blue window appeared before him. Own coins, 5,100. Dakja almost choked. The little monster was trying to rob him blind. Is this guy serious? That's too much. The imp shrugged carelessly. Then I guess you can just die. Its voice became colder. It's entirely up to my discretion whether I even accept your coins. The creature floated higher. If I don't like it, I can just put an end to all of this. The threat hung heavily in the air. But instead of panicking, Doc just smiled. Go ahead and kill me if you dare. The imp blinked. Dakja rose to his feet despite the rushing water. I said go ahead and kill me. His gaze never wavered. You can't, right? The imp fell silent. Because Dakja already knew the answer. Bai Hyung couldn't kill him. Not here. Not now. A faint smile appeared on Dakja's face. The constellations should be having fun watching me. He looked directly at the imp. If you intended to kill me, you wouldn't have come to see me in the first place. The imp's expression twisted. Haha, you making me really angry. Its red eyes gleamed dangerously. Hey, what do you think you're? Before it could finish, Dakja spoke first. Low-rank imp, Bai Hyung. Bai Hyung froze. The moment Dakja casually called him a storyteller, the little Dakibi's eyes widened in shock. How's being a storyteller, a streamer, going for you? A violent reaction followed immediately. What? How do you know my name? Dakja only smiled. Streaming nowadays sucks, doesn't it? Especially with the constellations being so stingy. Bai Hyung looked as if he had seen a ghost. Who the hell are you? How does a mere human know all this? Blue messages flashed before the watching constellations. A small number of constellations are dubious of your identity. Constellation Veiled Conspirator is sparkling with excitement because of your schemes. Dakja knew he had everyone's attention now. Lowering his voice, he made an offer. How about you turn off the channel and we talk? The suggestion stunned Bai Hyung. After a brief hesitation, the Dakibi complied. The connection to the constellations was temporarily closed. Now only the two of them remained inside the sea serpent's stomach. Now Bai Hyung said, Speak. His red eyes burned with curiosity. How does a mere human like you know of the Star Stream? The Star Stream. The vast broadcasting system connecting the entire universe. The constellations were its subscribers. Humans were the performers. And the Dakibis were the broadcasters who connected the two sides. Normally, no human should know any of this. But Dakja brushed the question aside. That's not important right now. Then he delivered a sentence that struck directly at Bai Hyung's heart. Bai Hyung, don't you want to become a king imp? The Dakibi's body jolted. What are you? Dakja continued before he could finish, surpassing Dakgak and Gildao, becoming the greatest storyteller in the realm of monsters and demons. Every word landed like a hammer. Those names represented legendary figures among Dakibis, a dream so absurd that few even dared to imagine it. Dakja slowly extended his hand. Imp Bai Hyung, form a contract with me. A confident smile appeared on his face. And I, his eyes gleamed with certainty, will make you into an imp king. For the first time since entering the sea serpent's stomach, Bai Hyung was completely speechless. The little Dakibi stared blankly at the human before him, because Dakja wasn't begging anymore. He was recruiting him, and somehow, despite how ridiculous the proposal sounded, Bai Hyung couldn't ignore the possibility that this strange human might actually be capable of making it happen. Dakja's proposal left Bai Hyung stunned. I'll make you the king of the Dakibis. For a moment, the little Dakibi simply stared at him. Then he burst into uncontrollable laughter. Crazy. You're completely crazy. His laughter echoed throughout the sea serpent's stomach. I should have known when you rejected the sponsorship of all those constellations. Dakja remembered the sponsor selection back in the subway. Powerful constellations had offered to become his backers, but he had deliberately refused every one of them. Bai Hyung shook his head. I don't know how you know about the Star Stream broadcasting system, but I cannot accept that offer. Unlike constellations, Dakibis couldn't become sponsors. You seem to have misunderstood. Dakja calmly corrected him. I never asked you to sponsor me. I don't need your strength. What I need is your channel. Bai Hyung blinked. My channel? The Dakibi clearly didn't understand. Dakja sighed. Looks like you don't get it. Let me explain it more simply. Then he delivered the real proposal. I want to sign an exclusive contract with your channel. Baehyung froze. An exclusive stream contract. For a human to request such a thing directly from a Dakibi was unheard of. Wait, are you asking for a stream contract right now? Yes. Dakja's answer was immediate. A stream contract was originally an agreement between Dakibis and constellations. When a constellation chose an incarnation, that incarnation would appear on a specific channel, and the Dakibi managing the channel would receive a share of the coins earned as commission. The incarnation had no say in the arrangement. Despite being called a sponsorship, the relationship was little different from servitude. Baehyung burst into laughter. This is hilarious. A mere human wants a stream contract? You? A bug without a sponsor. But Dakja remained composed. That's exactly why it's worth signing with me. Because I don't have a sponsor. Then he asked a simple question. Why do you think constellations join channels in the first place? According to Dakja, Starstream subscribers could be divided into two groups. The first were the entertainment seekers, beings who watch channels simply to relieve boredom and enjoy interesting stories. The second were sponsor seekers, constellations looking for promising incarnations worthy of investment. To become a successful channel, a Dakibi had to attract at least one of those groups. Either provide exciting entertainment or discover an incarnation worth sponsoring. Baehyung listened impatiently. You're knowledgeable, but what does any of that have to do with this? Dakja smirked. No wonder your subscriber count hasn't even reached 3 digits. That jab instantly irritated the Dakibi. Shut up and get to the point. Dakja leaned forward. What if your channel could satisfy both groups at the same time? Baehyung immediately rejected the idea. That's impossible. Baehyung could no longer laugh so confidently. Baehyung finally began to understand Dakja's real intention. What if the incarnation never chooses a sponsor? The question hit him like lightning. An incarnation without a sponsor would keep the attention of both groups of constellations. The entertainment seekers would stay because the story remained unpredictable. The sponsor seekers would stay because they would continue competing to recruit that incarnation. Suddenly, everything made sense. Wait, is that why you didn't choose a sponsor? Yes. Dakja nodded calmly. By now, the constellations were probably in chaos. They were demanding that Baehyung reopen the channel. They wanted answers. Who was this strange incarnation who seemed to know the future? Why had he intentionally allowed himself to be eaten by the sea serpent? Could he really foresee upcoming events? The mystery surrounding Kim Dakja was growing by the second. Baehyung tried to reject the idea. Stop. You're being ridiculous. An ordinary human can never defeat sponsored incarnations. That's the law of this world. Dakja simply smiled. And I'm saying I'll prove that's possible. Just do what I say. Didn't I promise I'd make you the king of the Dakibis? The Dakibi fell silent. For the first time, he was seriously considering the proposal. Dakja could see the hesitation in his eyes. Then he delivered the final push. A confident smile appeared on his face. The future already belonged to him. Baehyung finally gave in. Let's settle your scenario, failure first. Pay me the 5,100 coins and I'll. Dakja immediately interrupted him. What are you talking about? I didn't fail. Baehyung froze. The Dakibi looked genuinely confused. Dakja pushed himself to his feet and looked around the sea serpent's stomach. I must have already fulfilled the conditions by now. Baehyung stared at him in confusion. The conditions? Dakja spread his arms and smiled. Just open the channel. Then he raised a finger. It's about to begin. A moment later, a system message exploded into view. A hidden scenario had appeared. Even Baehyung's eyes widened in shock. Dakja calmly read the notification. Hidden scenario, Commander Slayer. Category, hidden. Difficulty, A+. Clear conditions. Kill the sea commander ichthyosaur and escape from its stomach. Time limit, 10 days. Reward, 9,000 coins. Failure, death. The moment the scenario appeared, the entire situation changed. Baehyung hurriedly reopened the broadcast. Dear Constellations, please calm down. The broadcast was shut down because of a server error. I swear I didn't close it on purpose. The little Dakibi desperately tried to save himself from the furious complaints pouring in from every direction. Preferential treatment? Dear Constellations, I'm a Dakibi. Do you know what would happen if I did that? I'd be erased. While Bai-hyung struggled with the audience, Dokja completely ignored the chaos. Dokja studied the available items carefully. Hey, are these the only items I can buy right now? Isn't there a search function? Dokja smirked as he scrolled through the Dakibi bag. A streamer's vow wasn't something to be taken lightly. To gain access to the Starstream's cash shop, he had forced Bai-hyung to keep the channel open. Without an active broadcast, incarnations weren't allowed to use the Dakibi bag. Now that a hidden scenario had begun, there was no avoiding the uproar from the constellations. While Bai-hyung desperately tried to calm the audience, Dokja focused on the shop interface. Help me out first. Bai-hyung looked over with a twitching eye. There's a search button in the lower right corner. Thanks. The shop could be used by both humans and Dakibis. Dokja only needed a few searches. Search, Ancient Dragon. The reaction was immediate. Bai-hyung nearly jumped out of his skin. What the hell? How do you even know about ancient dragons? Dokja shrugged. I just picked a cool-sounding name. The search results appeared. Ancient Dragon's Heart. SS rank. A legendary heart containing the power of the ancient dragon Ignitus. Price, 1,500,000 coins. Status, sold out. Dokja wasn't surprised. According to Ways of Survival, the owner of that item was somewhere in Italy. A lucky bastard with a sponsor wealthy enough to buy a treasure worth over 1 million coins. For a brief moment, Dokja regretted refusing a sponsor. Then he continued. Search, Great Demon's Eyeball. Search, Purest Sword Force. One impossible item after another. Bai-hyung stared at him in disbelief. What do you even know all these names? Bai-hyung looked over Dokja's purchases and nearly exploded. So, the things you bought are 4 mucus packs and 4 thorns? Why do you even need those useless items? Dokja simply shrugged. You don't need to know. The items were laughably cheap. Stonehog Sharp Thorn. Price, 100 coins. Hammer Seahorse's Mucus. Price, 100 coins. Only 800 coins spent. Compared to the legendary treasures he had searched earlier, these looked like junk. You won't get a refund even if you regret buying those. All right, I know. A notification appeared. The Constellation Secret Plotter is interested in your plan. Another followed immediately. The Constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon is staring angrily at your actions. Dokja smiled and casually closed the message window. If it annoys you, don't watch. The gesture nearly made Bai-hyung faint. Ignoring a constellation was one thing. Ignoring the Abyssal Black Flame Dragon was another matter entirely. Then another message appeared. Channel BI 7623 has been closed. The broadcast had finally ended. The spectators were gone. Only Dokja and Bai-hyung remained inside the stomach of the Sea Commander Ichthyosaur. The little Dakibi crossed his arms. I hope you didn't forget. I still haven't agreed to your offer. I know. We agreed to negotiate the terms of the contract only after you clear this scenario successfully. Dokja adjusted the bags hanging from his waist and nodded. That's right. The Dakibi sighed heavily. Well, I have to get going now. Try your best to clear the scenario. I can't stay beside you forever. Get going then. You really are a shameless bastard. Thanks. Bai-hyung pointed a tiny finger at him. Oh well, hang in there. Golden sparks burst around the Dakibi's body. At the same moment, a message appeared. The channel hashtag BI 7623 has been opened. May the story bless you. Then Bai-hyung vanished in a flash of light. Dokja shielded his eyes and watched the glow disappear. Now he was alone, completely alone inside the stomach of the Sea Commander Ichthyosaur. He checked the time. 21:41. There wasn't much time left before the creature's digestive acid began flooding the chamber. If he waited too long, everyone trapped inside would melt alive. Dokja moved immediately. He opened one of the mucus pouches and poured the thick black substance onto his palm. The foul-smelling slime stretched like tar between his fingers. Without hesitation, he coated one of the stone hog's sharp thorns with the mucus. The black liquid covered the entire spike until it gleamed with a sticky sheen. Then he looked toward the walls of flesh surrounding him. Countless breathing pores opened and closed across the ichthyosaur's stomach lining. The entire place seemed alive. Suddenly the walls contracted. Water surged violently through the stomach. It's starting. The digestive process had begun. Dakja tightened his grip on the coated thorn. His expression hardened. I'll definitely leave this place alive. The moment he made that vow, he raised his arm. Then he hurled the thorn with all his strength. The sharpened spike flew through the air like a spear, straight toward the living wall of the sea commander, Ichthyosaur. The first move of his plan had begun. The ichthyosaur's body reacted instantly. Far above the Han River, the gigantic sea monster suddenly rose from the water. Fighter jets streaked across the burning night sky as smoke covered the distant city, but the creature ignored everything around it. Its crimson eyes widened in pain and rage. Then it opened its enormous jaws and released a deafening roar. Inside its stomach, chaos erupted. The walls convulsed violently. Torrents of water spun into a massive whirlpool as the beast thrashed from the irritation Dakja had caused. Everyone trapped inside was thrown around like leaves in a storm. Dakja's body slammed hard against the fleshy wall. Water crashed into him again and again, threatening to tear away his grip and drag him into the center of the vortex. The pressure was overwhelming. Every muscle screamed in pain as he struggled to hold on. His clothes were soaked. His body was covered in slime and stomach fluids. Yet somehow, he managed to remain attached to the wall. The mucus-coated thorn had worked. Dakja gritted his teeth. A thought crossed his mind. How long had it been? Had he really believed he could do this? He was nothing more than an ordinary reader. Not a hero. Not the protagonist. Then another memory surfaced. A worried voice asking if everything would be all right. His mother's face. The one person who had always endured hardship without complaint. It'll be fine. After all, that person was his mother. The thought steadied him. This wasn't a dream. He wished it were, but it wasn't. The world of ways of survival had become reality. Originally, he had watched this story from afar, safe behind the pages of a novel. Back then, none of it could affect him. There had never been any danger of dying inside the ichthyosaur phase. Using the stone hog's sharp thorns and the sticky seahorse mucus, he had plugged the openings that released digestive juices into the stomach. The massive beast suffered because of it. Lightning-like spasms raced through the stomach walls as the creature struggled with the blockage. The ichthyosaur grew weaker with each passing day, unable to properly digest anything. Dakja clung to the fleshy wall, barely conscious. Really, a faint smile appeared on his face. That's great. System messages appeared before him. Several constellations admired his determination and persistence. Coins poured into his account as spectators rewarded the unbelievable sight of a human surviving inside a grade 7 monster for days. For days had passed since the hidden scenario began. Even Baihyung was stunned. The Dakibi stared at the plugged openings in disbelief. Using stone hog thorns like that had never occurred to him. The thorns were originally hunting tools used by sea creatures to kill prey. No one had ever thought of using them to block the ichthyosaur's digestive ducts. Then it happened. The exhausted monster finally reached its limit. A violent tremor shook the entire chamber. Dakja lost his grip and crashed into the stomach floor. At the same moment, blue system windows exploded into existence. The hidden scenario had ended. The sea commander Ichthyosaur was dead. Rewards immediately flooded in. Dakja collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily. His body was covered in wounds, acid burns, slime, and dried blood. But none of that mattered. A weak smile spread across his face. I've survived. For the first time since the apocalypse began, he had achieved something nobody else could. Baihyung floated nearby, still unable to hide his amazement. The Dakibi explained that stone hogs normally lived along the coast and hunted small sea creatures. Their sharp thorns were designed to pierce prey and kill them. However, using those thorns to seal the digestive openings of a giant sea monster was something completely unexpected. It was a trick that only Kim Dakja could have known. because he was the only person in the world who had read the story to its very end. The constellations finally understood what Kim Dokja had done. Some of them had already figured out his strategy and smiled knowingly. Others only now realized why he had purchased such strange items from the Dakibi bag. A few even complained that he should have explained his plan beforehand. Bai Hyung floated beside him, still amazed. The hammerhead seahorse mucus, which had seemed completely worthless, turned out to be the key to survival. The creature naturally evolved resistance to the digestive fluids of ichthyosaurs because they were one of its natural predators. Before sealing the digestive ducts with the stone hog thorns, Dokja had spread the remaining mucus over his body and clothing. As the thorns pierced deep into the flesh of the ichthyosaur, concentrated life force leaked from the wounds. Through the mucus coating his skin, Dokja slowly absorbed that energy. System messages appeared repeatedly. His stamina gradually increased. His stamina attribute rose from level 11 to level 12. The rest had been nothing but a test of willpower. Bai Hyung admitted that he never would have discovered such a method. Even he didn't know the mucus possessed such remarkable resistance to digestive fluids. Dokja casually explained that hammerhead seahorses had evolved that trait because they were frequently eaten by ichthyosaurs. That knowledge had come directly from the novel. The exclusive skill fourth wall also helped him survive by dulling part of the agony. Bai Hyung eventually praised him. It had been a truly incredible survival performance. But Dokja had no interest in compliments. Enough. Open the Dakibi bag. Without hesitation, he drove one of the thorns into a section of the stomach wall and broke through. A brilliant blue sphere emerged from inside the flesh. An item notification appeared. Ichthyosaur's core found. The glowing orb floated in his hand as Bai Hyung stared in disbelief. Dokja immediately announced his next move. He wanted to place the core on the Dakibi auction as a barter item. The Dakibi nearly exploded. How did this human know about a feature that most incarnations never even discovered? Dokja calmly stated the exchange condition. The item he wanted in return was something called broken faith. Bai Hyung was once again left speechless. There probably wasn't a single incarnation currently alive who even possessed such an item. As Dokja began thinking about his next purchase, Bai Hyung suddenly interrupted him. Before moving on to the next scenario, there was one more thing to discuss. The Dakibi's eyes sparkled greedily. Constellations. A wide smile spread across his face. Let's watch an advertisement before proceeding to the next scenario. Dokja could only stare in silence. Then a contract window appeared before him. It was a stream contract agreement. The contract proposed that Kim Dokja would sign an exclusive partnership with the Dakibi Bai Hyung for the duration of all future scenarios. He would not choose a sponsor constellation. He would remain active only in Bai Hyung's channel. In exchange, both sides would share the channel's profits according to mutually negotiated terms. Dokja carefully reviewed the stream contract. At first glance, it seemed surprisingly fair. Bai Hyung was even using the formal contract terms of Gap and Yule, placing Dokja in a higher position. Humans generally preferred being the Gap in a contract. Still, something bothered him. There's one thing missing. Bai Hyung blinked innocently. Impressed? You just have to agree to the terms. The stream contract is a sole pledge. Dokja shook his head. The ratio. The moment he said it, Bai Hyung began sweating. The Dakibi laughed awkwardly. Then he quickly proposed his offer. A 50-50 split. Any future donations received through the channel would be divided equally between them. As an added bonus, Dokja wouldn't have to pay the usual channel fees. To Bai Hyung, it sounded perfectly reasonable. To Dokja, it sounded like a scam. Have I been taken for a fool? Bai Hyung panicked. This is the industry's standard settlement rate. And technically, he wasn't wrong. Normally, constellations watched incarnations through Dakibi channels. Any profits generated from sponsorships and donations were divided according to established percentages. That was the standard business model. But Kim Dokja wasn't a normal incarnation. He had no sponsor. And sponsoring an incarnation without a constellation backing required Dakibis to pay enormous fees to the star stream. In other words, Bai Hyung was already making a fortune simply because Dokja existed on his channel. Dokja stared directly at him. Because of me, haven't you been having a good time? Bai Hyung's red eyes twitched. Then Dokja delivered his offer. 10-0. For a moment, silence filled the cavern. Then Bai Hyung exploded. What? Dokja smiled calmly. You'll only get the commission. I won't pay you a single coin. The Dakibi nearly fainted. That wasn't negotiation. That was robbery. Bai Hyung desperately countered. How about 7-3? But Dokja immediately began talking about leaving for another channel. Maybe you should ask Gildel's channel instead. The mere mention of another Dakibi sent Bai Hyung in a crisis mode. Bai Hyung fought desperately to keep the negotiations alive. 8-2. I can't give any more than that. Dokja's answer was immediate. 10-0. The tiny Dakibi looked like he was about to explode. His red eyes bulged as he gritted his teeth. The ad will end soon. Can't you see the constellations complaining? System messages flooded the air. The constellations were complaining about the prolonged advertisement. Some regretted paying commission fees just to watch a contract negotiation. Others demanded that the scenario continue already. Under mounting pressure, Bai Hyung finally broke. Damn it, fine. Then he asked the question he had been dreading. Will you sign a contract now? Dokja smiled. Oh, one more thing. Bai Hyung nearly had a heart attack. What else? Dokja casually extended his hand. You have to make a separate down payment. Then he delivered the final blow. Give me 5,000 coins. The Dakibi looked like his soul had left his body. A moment later, the scenery around Dokja shifted. After spending 4 days trapped inside the ichthyosaur's stomach, he was finally expelled back into the outside world. Water exploded around him as he emerged into the Han River. Dokja took a deep breath. Fresh air after 4 days. Originally, he had hoped to finish in only 2 days, but even Yu Jung-hyuk had taken 4 days to hunt the ichthyosaur in the original novel. This result wasn't bad at all. More importantly, he had accomplished far more than simply surviving. He had signed a stream contract. He had earned thousands of coins, and he had turned Bai Hyung into his personal ATM. Handed over 5,000 coins. The Dakibi floated nearby, looking completely defeated. To Dokja, the situation was almost funny. Back in the real world, he couldn't even secure a proper contract. Yet here, simply because he was the only reader who knew the future, he had become someone extraordinary. At that moment, a blue notification appeared. The exclusive skill Fourth Wall is in effect. Dokja frowned. The fourth wall again. Then another thought crossed his mind. Could this be a system error? His private attributes still wouldn't open properly. When he asked Bai Hyung about it, the Dakibi immediately denied the possibility. There can't be any errors in the system. Nevertheless, the system suddenly responded. You have received 5,000 coins as down payment. At the same time, another message appeared. Dakibi Bai Hyung is attempting to use system interference on you. Bai Hyung froze. For the first time, even the Dakibi looked genuinely shocked. Dokja finally understood the true nature of the fourth wall. It wasn't just a mental skill. It could even block the absolute interference of the Dakibis. No one could see his attributes window because the fourth wall concealed it completely. As long as the skill remained active, his secrets were safe. Before he could think further, a strange sensation swept across his body. Blue light engulfed him. Then the system announced, "You have entered the area of the second main scenario." Dokja's eyes widened. The next scenario had already begun. More notifications appeared immediately. The area of the scenario has become highly contaminated. Take a deep breath and head for the underground with haste. The moment he read the warning, Dokja moved. It's here. Purple fog rolled through the city streets like a living tide. It spread between buildings, swallowing everything in its path. A new message appeared. You have been exposed to poisonous fog. The deadly mist had arrived. Far above, one of the constellations reacted. The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon smiles insidiously. Dokja ignored it. His focus remained on the city, the empty streets, the shattered buildings, the poisonous fog creeping through every corner. This was the moment he had been waiting for. This was where the real story truly began. The poisonous fog had already spread across the city. Outside, terrifying creatures roamed the streets. Massive stone-scaled monsters smashed through buildings, while giant insect-like beasts prowled through the haze. Their shrieks echoed through the empty roads as debris rained down around them. Dakja ignored the chaos. Instead, he headed straight for a nearby convenience store. The shelves were already half empty, but there was still enough left. He quickly swept food, drinks, and supplies into plastic bags. Every second mattered. A system message floated before him. The surrounding land area for the scenario is heavily polluted. Hold your breath and go to the basement as quickly as possible. These supplies should be enough. He adjusted the bags in his hands. The monkey lungs effect was nearly over. He needed to reach the underground soon. Then, a faint voice echoed from somewhere inside the store. "Help!" Doc just stopped. "Help! Help me!" The voice was weak, desperate. Slowly, he turned around. Someone was still alive. Among the overturned shelves and scattered products, a woman lay collapsed on the floor. Her body trembled uncontrollably. A mask covered her mouth, but even through it her breathing sounded strained. When she noticed him, her eyes widened. "A survivor. Help me, please." For a brief moment, Dakja stared at her silently. Most people had already died from the poisonous fog. Without a word, he took a step forward. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the silent convenience store, and the woman waited anxiously for his answer. Without wasting another second, Dakja hoisted the injured woman onto his back and sprinted through the poisoned streets. The toxic fog swirled around them like a living storm as he raced forward with bags of supplies in both hands. Every breath mattered. Every moment counted. The station above Aksu had already been destroyed. That meant there was only one viable destination left. Gumho Station, the nearest underground station, and finally reached the entrance. Then his heart sank. The gate was sealed shut. Damn, it's blocked. Dakja panted heavily. The effect of the Elaine monkey's lung was fading rapidly. He glanced around. There had to be another way. Then he spotted it. Exit number 4. Without hesitation, he rushed toward it. A metal shutter blocked the entrance. But unlike the others, there were voices behind this one. People. Survivors. Dakja crouched beside the shutter and knocked. The sounds echoed beneath the metal barrier. A moment later, movement stirred inside. "What the hell? Move back." Several men approached cautiously. "Open the door." The survivors froze when they saw him. A young man carrying an injured woman on his back. One of the men immediately shook his head. "No, you can't come in. Get lost. This place is already full. We don't need anyone else." Dakja's eyes narrowed. Full. That wasn't right. He couldn't remember any such event from the novel. Had something changed? Or had he forgotten a detail? Without responding, he bit down harder on the monkey lung. The purification effect was nearly gone. He didn't have time to argue. And Dakja had already decided that he wasn't leaving. Dakja didn't wait for permission. The moment he realized the survivors had no intention of opening the shelter, he forced his way inside. Panic erupted instantly. The men who had been guarding the entrance stumbled backward in shock, scrambling to get out of his path as he stepped into the station with the injured woman still on his back. A notification flashed before his eyes. "You have entered the safety zone." At last, for the first time since entering the second scenario, he was no longer surrounded by poisonous fog. Dropping the supply bags beside him, Dakja carefully lowered the woman to the floor. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. Without hesitation, he handed her a piece of the Elaine monkey's lung. "Put this in your mouth. It won't heal you completely, but it'll help." The woman weakly accepted it and began breathing more steadily. Only then did Dakja allow himself a moment to think. Something felt wrong. If events had followed the original story, there was a high chance this woman would have died long before reaching safety. Yet here she was, alive. The existence of this survivor alone was already proof that the future he knew was beginning to change. Dakja studied her silently. Should he investigate further? Should he find out who she really was? Before he could think any further, a loud voice echoed through the station. There. It's him. Dakja looked up. A crowd was approaching. Several men marched toward him with flashlights and makeshift weapons in hand. Their footsteps echoed across the station floor as they surrounded him. One man stepped forward and glared down at him. Who the hell are you? Dakja blinked. The question felt absurd. Why ask that now? Kim Dakja. The man frowned. Kim Dakja? That's your name? Yes. For a brief moment, silence filled the station. Then the man's face twisted with irritation. Who the hell asked for your name? Asked what kind of bastard you are. The atmosphere instantly grew hostile. Before Dakja could respond, another survivor suddenly pointed toward the woman beside him. Wait, that's the girl from the outcast group. The crowd's expressions changed. Didn't she come back with your group? The injured woman lowered her gaze nervously. The thing is, the tension in the station thickened. Dakja could already tell this wasn't going to be a simple misunderstanding. These people weren't interested in hearing explanations. The leader's lips curled into a smug grin. So that's what this is about. The men behind him laughed nervously, immediately understanding what he meant. In stories about the apocalypse, there was always a character like this. The obvious villain. The kind of man who mistook chaos for freedom and believed the collapse of society gave him permission to do whatever he wanted. One of the survivors scratched the back of his head and laughed awkwardly. Sorry, Chulsu Hyungnim. You should have been first. Dakja searched his memory. Chulsu? The name meant nothing to him. If he couldn't remember it from the novel, then the man wasn't important, which meant he was exactly the kind of person who disappeared before the real story even began. As the men continued grinning among themselves, Dakja slowly rose to his feet. The leader pointed toward the injured woman. Hand her over. Dakja stared at him. What? Before he could respond, another survivor shouted excitedly. Hyungnim, he has food. The leader's smile widened. Leave the girl and the food behind. Then get the hell out of here. He spread his arms as if he were offering mercy. Do that, and I'll let you live. Yet these people had already become exactly what every cliché survival story warned about. Ironically, real people were often more predictable than fiction. Blue messages suddenly appeared before his eyes. The Constellation prisoner of the Golden Headband was furious at the thugs. The Constellation devil, like Judge, was enraged by the injustice unfolding in front of him. Then another notification appeared. A prize scenario had been created. Dakja almost smiled. Not bad. The Constellations weren't just watching. They wanted entertainment. And these men had just volunteered themselves as the main attraction. Across from him, Chulsu laughed confidently. You still not leaving? The crowd tightened their grip on their weapons. Dakja, however, felt almost sorry for them. The scenario was bad news for him, but it was far worse for the people standing in front of him. Chulsu stepped forward with a sneer. If you don't get lost right now, I'm really going to kill you. The scenario window hovered in the air. Prize scenario. Get rid of the disturber. The Constellations were angry that these idiots were delaying the story. Time limit, 5 minutes. Dakja glanced at the countdown. Then he looked back at Chulsu. The man never saw the punch coming. Dakja's fist slammed into his face with brutal precision. Chulsu's head snapped sideways as his body flew backward across the station floor. The crowd froze. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They simply stared. The leader had been sent flying with a single hit. How is he still standing after taking that punch? Who the hell is this guy? Has he done this before? The answer was simple. In the world of scenarios, strength wasn't determined by courage alone. Stats mattered. Stamina, health, agility. Even a small difference could completely change the outcome of a fight. His overall level had already reached 33. Meanwhile, most of the survivors in the station still had stats that barely reached single digits. The difference between them wasn't small. It was overwhelming. The thugs struggled to get back on their feet, clutching their injured legs and groaning in pain. Even with support from the Constellations, they couldn't easily overcome the massive gap between their abilities and Dakja's. His gaze settled on the man he had just knocked down. A blue information window appeared before him. Bang Chulsu, 34 years old. Sponsor, Monarch of Small Fries. An ordinary character with mediocre skills and an inflated sense of confidence. Dakja stared at the sponsor's name for a moment. Of all the constellations available, why would anyone willingly choose a sponsor called the Monarch of Small Fries? The name alone was enough to make him question the man's judgment. Then a memory surfaced. Bang Chulsu, the notorious leader of the Chuldo group, one of the worst scumbags among the survivors of Gumho Station. Dakja's eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. According to the original story, Bang Chulsu should have died long ago, killed by Yu Junghyuk. So why was he still alive? Chulsu suddenly grinned through the blood on his face. Oh, you're one of those types too, aren't you? Dakja frowned. What are you talking about? Chulsu's smile only widened. I knew it. I felt something familiar from you. For a brief moment, Dakja was pulled into a memory. A dark and uncomfortable memory. A voice whispered from somewhere deep inside. Maybe you could have saved them. Maybe you wanted to see it happen. Maybe you enjoyed watching people suffer. The accusations echoed through his mind like ghosts clawing their way from the past. Then another voice appeared. Be honest. You just wanted to watch, didn't you? You wanted to see what happened to those people. Dakja's expression darkened. The memory felt real. Too real. But before it could take hold completely, a bright blue message flashed before his eyes. The exclusive skill fourth wall has negated the effect of bluff from the character Bang Chulsu. The whispers vanished instantly. The darkness shattered. Reality returned. Dakja moved before anyone could react. In a single motion, he drove the steel pipe straight through Bang Chulsu's hand and pinned it against the wall. A scream tore through the station. Blood splattered across the concrete as Chulsu writhed in agony. You're not in a position to talk. Blue messages immediately appeared. The Constellation Monarch of Small Fries is excited. The Constellation Monarch of Small Fries has donated 100 coins. Dakja almost laughed. Unfortunately, the Monarch of Small Fries was infamous for being a complete lunatic. Unlike most sponsors, this constellation didn't care about protecting its incarnation. If anything, it enjoyed watching them suffer. Originally, Dakja had intended to leave after settling the situation. But now he had changed his mind. A new message flashed before him. 2 minutes left until the scenario ends. Around him, the remaining thugs stared in horror. Their leader was bleeding against the wall, yet the sponsor watching over him was apparently having the time of his life. Then a trembling voice broke the silence. Stop. Please, let him go. Dakja turned. The plea hadn't come from one of the gang members. It came from an ordinary survivor, a frightened man who couldn't bear to watch anymore. Dakja looked at him quietly. Humans were weak. That much was obvious. Why did weak people commit such terrible acts? Was it because the world had fallen into chaos? Because civilization had collapsed? Because fear stripped away morality? Or was it something far simpler? Instinct. The instinct to dominate. To take. To hurt others whenever there were no consequences. His gaze drifted toward the injured woman sitting against the wall. The same woman they had treated as if she were nothing more than an object. Then Dakja grabbed Bang Chulsu by the collar and pulled him forward. Their eyes met. Why did you do that? His voice was calm, almost emotionless. But everyone in the station could feel the pressure behind those words. The room fell silent. Bang Chulsu's swollen face twitched. For the first time since they met, he didn't have an answer ready. And for the first time, genuine fear appeared in his eyes. Bang Chulsu spat blood onto the floor and laughed bitterly. Then just kill me. His voice trembled with pain and rage. Damn this world. Dakja stared at him in silence. So that was the answer. It wasn't instinct. It wasn't panic. Bang Chulsu had been rotten long before the apocalypse began. The collapse of the world hadn't changed him. It had only revealed who he really was. And in a way, that truth felt disturbingly familiar. Just like me. For a brief moment, memories surfaced. A lonely boy sitting in the dark, staring at a glowing phone screen. A system message suddenly appeared. Only 10 seconds remained before the scenario ended. Dakja slowly rose to his feet. The world is destroyed. That fact would never change. The only thing left was learning how to survive inside the ruins. The countdown reached 0. Blue messages filled the air. The scenario had been cleared. 300 coins were awarded. The constellation monarch of Small Fries, apparently satisfied with the outcome, donated another 100 coins. Behind Dokja, the remaining gang members crawled toward their battered leader. They stared at him as if he were some kind of monster. "How can you do this?" Dokja didn't answer. Their opinions meant nothing. The old world was gone, and now he had to adapt to the new one. Without another word, he walked toward the injured woman. She was barely conscious. Her breathing remained weak, but at least she was still alive. Carefully, Dokja lifted her onto his back once again. The station fell silent as everyone watched. No one dared to stop him. No one dared to challenge him. With a supply bag hanging from one hand and the woman on his back, Dokja looked toward the survivors gathered deeper inside the station. Then he spoke. "Take me to the group." The words were simple, but every person present understood what they meant. Kim Dokja wasn't asking for permission. He was giving an order. And after everything they had just witnessed, nobody had the courage to refuse. The moment Kim Dokja entered Gumho Station, the atmosphere changed completely. The survivors gathered inside immediately recognized the people arriving from Kyolda Station. Whispers spread throughout the station. Many of the newcomers were injured. Others looked exhausted and barely able to stand. Yet somehow they had survived. The residents of Gumho Station stared in disbelief as Kim Dokja moved through the crowded station with a wounded woman at his side. A familiar voice suddenly called out to him. He turned and saw a young woman staring at him with wide eyes. For a moment, she looked completely frozen. Then relief flooded her face. "It's really Kim Dokja." Several familiar faces rushed toward him. They were overjoyed to see him alive. A small boy grabbed onto him while others gathered around, checking to make sure he was unharmed. For the first time since arriving, Kim Dokja found himself surrounded by people who were genuinely happy to see him. One of the survivors lowered his head. "I'm sorry for leaving you behind." Kim Dokja shook his head. It couldn't be helped. There was nothing any of us could have done. Then another remark caught his attention. "We're thankful Yu Jong-hyuk was right." Kim Dokja paused. "Yu Jong-hyuk?" The survivors nodded. "He said you'd probably survive." Kim Dokja's eyes narrowed slightly. "So Yu Jong-hyuk had been here. Where is he now?" "He left yesterday." The answer came immediately. Kim Dokja finally understood. That explained why the survivors from Kyoldu Station were still alive. In the original story, many of them should have died. But Yu Jong-hyuk had already left Gumho Station before those events could unfold. He had more important objectives to pursue. Yu Jong-hyuk was a regressor, a man who had lived through the same life again and again. By the time he reached his third regression, he had become someone capable of abandoning anything that slowed him down. If leaving Gumho Station helped him move closer to his goal, he would leave without hesitation. Still, Kim Dokja couldn't hide his disappointment. There was a time when Yu Jong-hyuk would have at least dealt with people like Bang Chol-soo before moving on. A survivor looked at Kim Dokja curiously. "Are you talking to yourself?" Kim Dokja blinked. "Just a habit." The explanation sounded weak even to him. A blue notification appeared before his eyes. "The constellation's secretive plotter likes your self-talk." Kim Dokja ignored it. As the commotion settled, Han Soo-young glanced around the station. "It looks like we're missing someone." Then she remembered. The manager. Before anyone could continue the conversation, a loud voice echoed through the station. "Everyone move aside." Heavy footsteps approached from the crowd. People quickly stepped back as a group of armed survivors pushed their way forward. Kim Dokja immediately noticed the bats and metal pipes in their hands. The atmosphere turned tense. Then he saw the man leading them. The moment their eyes met, the man's face turned pale. The man pointed at Kim Dokja with a trembling finger. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. A memory surfaced in Kim Dokja's mind. Just a few days earlier, that same man had desperately warned everyone about him. He had shouted that Kim Dokja was dangerous, that he was deceptive, that he should never be allowed into the station. The memory disappeared as another person stepped forward. A young man with a friendly smile casually placed a hand on the frightened man's shoulder. "Haha, That's no way to treat a guest. We should all try to get along. Unlike the others, the young man carried himself with complete confidence. He smiled warmly at Kim Dokja. It's nice to meet you. It seems you've only just arrived. He extended a hand. May I know your name? Kim Dokja studied him carefully. The man's face felt strangely familiar. My name is Cheon In-ho. The moment he heard the name, Kim Dokja remembered it. He had definitely seen that name somewhere before. Kim Dokja accepted the handshake. I'm Kim Dokja. At the same time, he quietly assessed the situation. So this was the person leading the station, the man in charge. That explained why the survivors from the Kyoldou group immediately backed down when he appeared. Kim Dokja had beaten several members of their group and taken their supplies. There was no way their leader would simply ignore that. Yet Cheon In-ho showed no signs of hostility. Instead, he smiled even more brightly. I've heard a lot about you. Kim Dokja frowned. Heard what? I heard that you fought the monsters and saved the people from our group. That wasn't the response Kim Dokja had expected. Before he could say anything else, Cheon In-ho suddenly turned toward the crowd and raised his voice. Everyone, please gather around. We have a brave newcomer joining us today. He pointed toward Kim Dokja. This person brought food for all of us. A wave of excitement spread through the station. Food. In the current world, that single word was enough to capture everyone's attention. Hungry eyes turned toward the bags Kim Dokja was carrying. Whispers quickly filled the air. People smiled for the first time in days. Something to eat. A real meal. For many of them, that was more valuable than anything else. Cheon In-ho spread his arms and smiled brightly. Welcome to Gumho Station, Kim Dokja. The crowd immediately began whispering among themselves. Kim Dokja almost laughed. So this was their plan. A blue notification appeared before his eyes. The constellation's secretive plotter is excited. Cheon In-ho led the group deeper into the station. At the moment, there are 86 people living in Gumho Station. He smiled. If we include you, then that makes 87. Kim Dokja looked around. There were fewer survivors than he had expected. When the scenarios first began, only the people near the station and those riding the train survived. Lee Hyun-sung nodded grimly. I don't like saying it, but that means every one of them cleared the first scenario. In other words, every person here had killed someone to survive. Every survivor in Gumho Station was a murderer. Kim Dokja already knew what kind of place this was. The survivors had gradually divided themselves into two groups, the powerful and the powerless, the mainstream group and a marginalized group. The mainstream group occupied the center of the station. They spoke confidently about rescue and recovery. Our leader is working hard. Everyone will be saved soon. Many survivors clung desperately to those words. Meanwhile, the marginalized group remained isolated along the edges of the station. Hungry children cried quietly. Parents struggled to reassure them. Be patient. The rescue teams will arrive soon. The government will do something. Listening to them, Kim Dokja wondered whether they truly believed those words or simply needed something to hold on to. When 100 murderers gather together, divisions are inevitable. The strong rise to the top. The weak are pushed aside. Cheon In-ho stood among his followers, smiling confidently. Everyone, don't lose hope. We'll be leaving this place soon. The crowd responded enthusiastically. Kim Dokja watched silently. Food distribution was completely controlled by the mainstream group. A large pile of supplies sat under their supervision. Unfortunately, the stockpile was shrinking fast. It won't last much longer. So we're sending people to the surface to search for food. Han Soo-young glanced toward the unconscious woman resting nearby. Hee-won was sent to the surface too. Hee-won. Kim Dokja looked at the woman. That's her name. Han Soo-young nodded. There were others who went with her. Her expression darkened, but only the marginalized group never came back. Kim Dokja immediately understood what that meant. The strongest survivors were protecting themselves while sending the weak to take all the risks. He turned toward Lee Hyun-sung. You never joined the mainstream group? Lee Hyun-sung looked uncomfortable. Well, I'm sure they tried pretty hard to recruit you. Lee Hyun-sung hesitated for a moment before answering. I thought it would be better to refuse. He lowered his eyes. I didn't want to abandon my principles. A faint smile appeared on his face. Maybe it's hypocritical to talk about right and wrong after everything that's happened, but it still felt wrong. Kim Dokja looked at him quietly. Then he said, hypocrisy isn't a bad thing. Lee Hyunsung blinked. As long as you never lose that feeling, you'll be fine. Many people would laugh at words like morality in a world that demanded murder for survival. But Kim Dokja knew better. Just because something was unavoidable didn't make it acceptable. No matter how necessary it became, there were lines people shouldn't forget. From across the station, Cheon In-ho approached with a friendly smile. Kim Dokja, could we talk for a moment? Kim Dokja already knew what was coming. The women and children sat nearby, clutching the food he had brought back. Cheon In-ho stopped in front of him. I'll get straight to the point. He extended a hand. Join our group. Just as I expected. Cheon In-ho continued smoothly. I can give you a high position. I want us to lead this station together. Kim Dokja crossed his arms. And if I refuse? Cheon In-ho laughed softly. Refuse? That's interesting. I never even considered that possibility. His smile never wavered. You saved members of our station. You defeated monsters. Someone with your abilities has a responsibility to lead people. So that's your angle. Cheon In-ho wasn't interested in partnership. He wanted legitimacy. Having Kim Dokja standing beside him would strengthen his authority over everyone in Gumho Station. You want to make use of my reputation. Cheon In-ho simply shrugged. It's not a big request. I only want your cooperation so that everyone here can survive. Then he pointed toward the people gathered around the station. A mother held a crying child in her arms. Elderly survivors sat against the walls with exhausted faces. Hungry people stared at the dwindling food supplies. Look at them. They need help. The entire station fell silent. All eyes turned toward Kim Dokja. Cheon In-ho's voice remained calm and persuasive. Can you really abandon those people? The question hung heavily in the air. Kim Dokja looked around at the crowd. Then he slowly raised his eyes. His expression remained completely unreadable. Lee Hyunsung glanced toward the group that had just left. Was it really okay to reject them like that? Kim Dokja looked at him. Did you want me to accept? That's not what I mean. Lee Hyunsung hesitated before continuing. It's what Cheon In-ho said at the end. The conversation replayed in his mind. If you ever change your mind, come find us. That won't happen. Lee Hyunsung frowned. He sounded confident. Kim Dokja shrugged. We'll find out soon enough. Then he looked down at the bags of food piled beside him. It's getting late. Aren't you hungry? The atmosphere immediately changed. The bags were opened, revealing canned food, snacks, and supplies packed tightly inside. Take one each. Lee Hyunsung stared at the mountain of food. Really? Are you sure? Before Kim Dokja could answer, a loud voice suddenly echoed through the station. Hey! Everyone froze. Several people stood nearby, staring directly at the food. Their expressions were anything but friendly. The group pushed through the crowd and approached. Are you seriously keeping all that food for yourselves? You don't even have enough to feed everyone. So you're just going to hoard it? More people gathered behind them. One man pointed angrily. We heard you promise to share food with everyone. Then why are you only giving it to your own group? Hand it over to Cheon In-ho. He'll make sure everyone gets a fair share. Kim Dokja remained seated. Beside him, Lee Gil-young quietly tightened his grip on the food he was holding. The crowd's anger continued to grow. In a ruined world like this, the most dangerous people weren't always the ones driven by despair. Sometimes the truly dangerous people were the ones who used the despair of others for their own benefit. At that moment, Kim Dokja finally remembered. Cheon In-ho, Gumho Station's self-proclaimed leader. A man who built power by manipulating fear, hunger, and desperation. Someone who convinced people they were acting for the greater good while quietly strengthening his own position. Then a familiar voice rose above the crowd. Choose. The station fell silent. Choose whether you'll hand over your resources and become a hero. A faint smile appeared on Cheon In-ho's face as he stepped forward. Or keep them for yourself and become a villain. The crowd immediately began murmuring. Hero. Villain. Such simple words. yet they were powerful enough to control people. Kim Dokja slowly narrowed his eyes. Cheon Inho, so this is your game. Before he could respond, a blue message suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes. You're currently within the area of the second main scenario. Move frequently toward the location where the main scenario is active. A sharp notification sound echoed through the station. Ding! The scenario was beginning to move again. The crowd erupted instantly. Give the food to Inho. Share it with everyone. What kind of person are you? The accusations came from every direction. Cheon Inho stood quietly behind them, watching the scene unfold with a faint smile. Now, Kim Dokja, make your decision. His expression never changed. For him, controlling people was effortless. By now, he was certain Kim Dokja had no choice. Without his protection, surviving in Gumho Station would be impossible. Then Cheon Inho suddenly raised a hand. Everyone calm down. I think you've misunderstood. The crowd fell silent. Kim Dokja has agreed to share the food. A wave of relief spread through the station. Of course, my group will handle the distribution. His eyes briefly met Kim Dokja's. Now you have no choice but to follow me. And I promise we will protect everyone until rescue arrives. A satisfied smile spread across his face. Fine, Kim Dokja finally answered. The crowd immediately relaxed. People gathered closer, expecting the food to be handed over. Cheon Inho smiled brightly. I'll gladly share my food with everyone. A brief pause followed. Then he added, but the smile on his face became sharper. It won't be free. The station froze. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. What does that mean? Not free. You're selling food right now. Even the constellations reacted. The eyes of several constellations are sparkling. The constellation Secretive Plotter snorts. Kim Dokja remained completely calm. That's right. I'm not a volunteer. His gaze shifted toward Cheon Inho. And I don't trust him. Cheon Inho's expression twitched for the first time. Someone shouted. Then how much? How many coins? Kim Dokja answered immediately. No money. The station became even quieter. Then he raised a finger. I only accept coins. Everyone stared blankly. Coins? Lee Hyun-sung looked worried. Kim Dokja, is this really a good idea? 50 coins for one food item is way too much. The others seemed to agree. Nobody in the station possessed that many coins. Kim Dokja simply smiled. Speaking of coins, you all still owe me 10 each. The members of his group froze. Even Young Hee-won looked surprised. A notification appeared before Kim Dokja. A few constellations are relieved that you aren't playing favorites. A small number of constellations have sponsored you with 100 coins. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly. Even the constellations understood what he was doing. Then an unexpected voice spoke up. That's fine. Everyone turned. Young Hee-won stood up. I'll pay right now. She stepped forward without hesitation. I don't need charity. The entire station fell silent. The first customer had appeared. Young Hee-won stepped forward and extended her hand. I'm Young Hee-won. Thank you for saving me this morning. Kim Dokja shook her hand. Don't mention it. Then Young Hee-won turned toward the others. You Sangha, Lee Hyun-sung, you two need to wake up. This isn't the time to make those kinds of faces. She pointed toward the pile of food. This guy risked his life to get all of this. Did you really expect handouts just because everyone else got them? Yu Sangha and Lee Hyun-sung exchanged embarrassed looks. Realization finally dawned on them. I'm sorry. I was thinking too selfishly. I don't need charity either. I'll pay from now on. The atmosphere changed immediately. If that's what you want. Kim Dokja held out a finger. You know how to transfer coins, right? Yu Sangha nodded. I learned a few days ago. The two touched fingertips. A burst of blue light flashed between them. We just press our index fingers together and state the amount. A notification appeared. Lee Gil-young has transferred 20 coins. Kim Dokja blinked. Huh, why did you give me that much? Lee Gil-young looked away awkwardly. It's for the chocolate bar you gave me this morning. For a moment, Kim Dokja didn't know what to say. Young Hee-won laughed. Gil-young is more mature than most adults here. A notification immediately appeared. A few constellations are showing interest in the incarnation Lee Gil-young. Nearby, Jung Hee-won lowered her voice. Those people still don't understand. They can't even see that the mainstream group is the one monopolizing all the food. She looked across the station toward Cheon In-ho's followers. The survivors eat whatever that group hands out, and then they're sent outside as scouts. Just like what happened to me this morning. Kim Dokja nodded. Exactly. That's why making everyone pay was important. Lee Hyun-sung still looked troubled. Then why not charge everyone the same price you charged us? At this rate, many of those people won't survive. Kim Dokja glanced toward the crowd. Well, his answer never came. Instead, he looked toward the dark sky beyond the station entrance. Let's wait a little longer. Night settled over Gumho Station. One by one, people fell asleep. Yu Sanga rested against a wall. Lee Gil-young slept with his head on her lap. Jung Hee-won sat nearby with her eyes closed. The station finally grew quiet. Only Lee Hyun-sung remained awake. Kim Dokja, you should get some sleep too. I'll stay up and keep watch. Kim Dokja shook his head. No, there's something I need to do first. Lee Hyun-sung frowned. What job? A faint smile appeared on Kim Dokja's face. The time had finally come to prepare for the next scenario. The next morning, chaos erupted throughout Gumho Station. Jung Hee-won stared at Kim Dokja in disbelief. You've got to be kidding me. All those people actually paid you? Kim Dokja simply shrugged. It wasn't only the marginalized survivors who had bought food. Even members of the mainstream faction had secretly paid coins during the night. Then a loud voice echoed through the station. Everyone, listen up. Cheon In-ho stood before the crowd with his followers gathered behind him. Starting today, we're limiting food rations. From now on, each person will receive only 1 pack of biscuits. The station exploded with complaints. What? That's only 3 biscuits. How are we supposed to survive on that? Others immediately pointed out the obvious. Don't scouts get extra rations? You think we don't already know that? Cheon In-ho smiled calmly. That's right. If you want more food, join the scouting teams. The crowd's expressions darkened. Everyone knew what scouting meant. Almost nobody who left the station ever came back. The only people who survive scouting are members of the mainstream group. You might as well be telling us to die. But Cheon In-ho merely spread his hands. If you don't like our arrangement, you're free to hunt for yourselves. The crowd fell silent. They had no power to oppose him. Then Cheon In-ho raised a finger. Actually, there's another option. His eyes shifted toward Kim Dokja. Yesterday, Kim Dokja made a very good point. Dokja immediately realized something was wrong. Last night, Cheon In-ho's faction had purchased more than half of all the food Dokja had been selling, and they had paid every coin without hesitation. Kim Dokja, you're making a terrible mistake. You'll regret this. The warning from Lee Hyun-sung suddenly echoed in Dokja's mind. A smile spread across Cheon In-ho's face. What he said was right. What in this world is truly free? The crowd listened carefully. If you want food, you must prove your worth. We will exchange food for anything valuable. A blue system message appeared. The character Cheon In-ho has activated the skill Insight. Sparkling particles surrounded him as the skill amplified his words. This is simply the natural order of things. A faint smile appeared on Dokja's face. So this is how you use your skill. Now the real game could begin. Kim Dokja quietly watched the crowd thank him, but he already understood what had happened. The reason everyone had suddenly become so obedient wasn't because they trusted Cheon In-ho. It was because of the man's skill. The insight skill had been subtly influencing the survivors, making them more susceptible to his words and authority. Jung Hee-won frowned. So the mainstream group still controls all the food. Wasn't your goal to break their monopoly by selling food instead of giving it away? Dokja nodded. That's right. I wanted everyone to start taking action for themselves. But because you sold food to the mainstream group, we're right back where we started. Dokja simply smiled. I couldn't refuse. They offered me a lot of coins. The amount stunned everyone. In total, he had earned 1,450 coins. Jung Hee-won stared at him in disbelief. Can we really trust this guy? Yusanga laughed softly. Yes, we can. Then she asked the obvious question. At least you still kept enough food for yourself, right? Dakja's answer left everyone speechless. Nope, I sold it all. The entire group froze. What? How can you believe in someone like this? Ignoring the commotion, Dakja crouched beside Lee Gil-young, who was quietly eating his snacks. You want me to eat it? No, you eat it. Then Dakja turned to the others. By the way, do any of you still have leftover food from yesterday? If you do, you should finish it. It would be best if all of it is gone before today ends. Nobody understood what he meant. Meanwhile, the station was becoming more unstable. Cheoninho had raised food prices dramatically. The same food that had sold for 50 coins now cost 200. When survivors complained, the mainstream group simply told them to leave. Desperation was spreading throughout Gumho Station. Then Dakja glanced toward the sign, pointing to Yaksa Station. A dark tunnel stretched into the distance. Someone had once warned him about it. People who go that way never come back. Even members of the mainstream group disappear. Dakja stared into the darkness of the tracks. The tunnel wasn't just another passage. It was connected to the next stage of the scenario. Young Hee-won sat near the platform entrance, watching Dakja stare into the darkness of the tunnel. Surely you're not thinking about going there yourself. Dakja didn't answer right away. After a moment, Hee-won spoke again. Did I properly thank you for yesterday? Yeah, you did. Even so, she lowered her head slightly. I still appreciate what you did. Then her expression hardened. See that guy over there with the injured leg? He's the one who assaulted me yesterday. Dakja followed her gaze. The man was hiding among the crowd, acting as if nothing had happened. No matter what happens, don't touch him. Hee-won's eyes widened. Because I'm going to kill that bastard myself. For the first time, Dakja looked genuinely surprised. Young Hee-won. In the original story, she should have died by now if he hadn't stepped in. She possessed a unique attribute called crouching figure. At first glance, it sounded ordinary, but Dakja knew better. A blue status window appeared before him. Name, Young Hee-won. Age, 27. Exclusive skills, Demon Slayer level 1. Kendo level 1. Private attribute, crouching figure. Potential, extremely high. Several constellations had already begun showing interest in her. At that moment, movement near the mainstream group's camp caught Hee-won's attention. Men were dragging women and elderly survivors toward the surface. Did you see that? They aren't just taking women anymore. They're taking old people too. She immediately turned to run. Wait, where are you going? I'm stopping them. If those people go to the surface, they'll never come back. Dakja's next words stopped her in her tracks. Then will you let them starve? The question struck her like a blow. The crouching figure attribute. Most people would assume it was weak. In reality, it was one of the rare evolutionary type attributes found in ways of survival. An attribute capable of growing into something extraordinary. Under the right conditions, it could even evolve into a legendary class attribute. Hee-won clenched her fists. So what are you saying? Should we just stand around and do nothing? Yes. At least for now. Anger flashed across her face. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Dakja let out a quiet sigh. Stopping this won't solve the real problem. This is happening because there's not enough food. As long as people are afraid of starving, this will keep happening. He studied her carefully. Maybe she wasn't just another survivor. Maybe she was someone worth recruiting. The only thing that concerned him was her Demon Slayer skill. Combined with her personality, it had the potential to turn her into a reckless killer if left unchecked. Hee-won. The real problem here is food. Right? Right. Then we eliminate the cause of the problem. Hee-won blinked. Dakja glanced at the screen of his phone. He should be arriving soon. Huh? What do you mean? Before Hee-won could get an answer, golden lightning suddenly exploded across the station ceiling. A shower of sparks rained down as a figure materialized in midair. The survivors froze. A dakibi, people stumbled backward in panic. The creature floating above them looked different from Baehyung. Smaller, rounder, and far more nervous. How has everyone been? You've all been bored, haven't you? The dakibi forced an awkward smile. The one who normally manages this channel was disciplined. Dakja's eyes narrowed. Disciplined? So for this scenario, I'll be in charge. That isn't Baihyung. The new Dakibi wiped sweat from his face. You all seem very peaceful. That Baihyung acted so arrogant and lowered the scenario difficulty this much. Then the Dakibi snapped his fingers. Immediately, blue messages appeared throughout the station. A scenario penalty has been added. Food reserves will be restricted from now on. All existing stockpiles of food will disappear. The survivors stared in disbelief. Boxes of food, cans, chocolate bars. Everything began floating into the air, wrapped in golden light. The food, their precious supplies vanished right before their eyes. The Dakibi laughed nervously. When you begin a scenario, you should always be thinking about how to clear it. It isn't right to just sit around and eat, is it? His expression suddenly twisted into something ugly. This planet Earth is full of trash. With another burst of lightning, the remaining food disappeared completely. The station fell silent. Everyone stared upward in shock. Their carefully guarded food reserves were gone. Every last piece. The new Dakibi looked down at the terrified crowd. Now, then, everyone, let's have fun from now on. The words sent a chill through the station. Around him, panic began spreading. People who had spent days hoarding food suddenly had nothing. Blue notification windows began appearing one after another around the station. Kim Dakja looked up at them and smiled faintly. Yeah, this was finally starting to feel like ways of survival. Another system message appeared. A scenario penalty has been added. The cost of survival clause has been activated. From now on, every person would lose 100 coins at midnight. Anyone unable to pay would die immediately. The penalty would remain in effect until the second main scenario was cleared. The station instantly descended into chaos. 100 coins every day. For many survivors, that was practically a death sentence. The days of hiding in the station and living off stockpiled food were over. The scenario was forcing everyone to move, forcing everyone to participate. Then another message appeared. You are currently in the area of the second main scenario. Move to locations where the main scenario is active. Cheon In-ho gathered the survivors once again. The mood in the station had completely changed after the new penalties were announced. Everyone knew that simply hiding underground was no longer an option. The situation has worsened. We need more people from the marginalized group to join our scouting teams. His voice echoed through the station. From now on, food will not be distributed to anyone who refuses to participate as a scout. A notification appeared before Kim Dakja. You have accurately read the thought of the character Cheon In-ho. Your understanding of the character Cheon In-ho has increased. Dakja could practically hear the man's thoughts. There's another food penalty now. Did Kim Dakja know this would happen? Nearby, Jung Hee-won stared helplessly at her empty hands. My biscuits. Dakja glanced at her. That's why I told you to eat them earlier. She looked as if she still couldn't believe what had happened. Meanwhile, another notification appeared. You have accurately read the thought of the character Cheon In-ho. Your understanding of the character Cheon In-ho has increased. Cheon In-ho was desperately trying to figure out whether Dakja had predicted all of this from the beginning. Even if he suspected the truth, he had no way to confirm it. Hee-won turned toward Dakja. You didn't know this would happen, did you? I expected something like this. Dakja looked at the floating system windows. Considering how aggressively the Dakibis had been pushing the scenario forward, a food-related restriction wasn't surprising. The real surprise was the cost of survival penalty. In the original story, the scenario at Gumho Station had been different. The addition of that penalty suggested that his contract with Baihyung had altered the flow of events more than he expected. Dakja, Lee Hyun-sung stepped forward. What should we do now? Should we join the scouting teams? No, we're not going above ground. Everyone looked confused. If we don't go above ground, how are we supposed to get food? Dakja answered calmly. The world has changed, so the food we eat has to change too. Silence followed. No one understood what he meant. Then Yusanga slowly widened her eyes. Wait a minute. Don't tell me. Dakja nodded. Yes. He turned toward the dark railway tunnel stretching beyond the station. We're gonna hunt monsters. The group froze. Monsters. Not people. Not scavenging. Not begging for rations. The creatures roaming the tracks themselves. Far below the station, endless darkness stretched through the underground tunnels. Somewhere inside that darkness, monsters were waiting. And Kim Dokja intended to turn them into food. In the long run, we need a team willing to face this situation head-on. Dokja nodded. That was exactly why they were leaving. Not to hide, not to negotiate, but to confront the source of the problem directly. Come back safely. The words came from behind them. Cheon In-ho stood among the survivors, watching their group prepare to leave. Dokja studied him quietly. He had expected opposition. After all, he had skipped the group's meetings and openly ignored the chain of command. Yet Cheon In-ho seemed almost relieved to see him leaving. A notification appeared. Your understanding of Cheon In-ho has increased. Your understanding of Cheon In-ho has reached a certain level. Dokja finally understood how the skill worked. There were two ways to increase character understanding. The first was earning a character's trust or favor. The second was accurately predicting what that character was thinking. Every time one of those conditions was fulfilled, understanding increased. In Cheon In-ho's case, the second condition had been triggered repeatedly. Another message appeared. The character Cheon In-ho is suspicious of your intentions. Before they could leave, Cheon In-ho called out again. While you're away, can one of my people join your group? Dokja had anticipated the request. Of course, he wouldn't let them leave without gathering information. We'd also like to learn more about your strategy. The tunnel stretched silently between them. Then a scream suddenly echoed through the station. Everyone turned. A terrified man wearing glasses stumbled backward. A corpse. There's a corpse. The survivors immediately rushed toward the tracks. Blood stained the ground. Part of a body lay across the railway line. Behind Dokja, Gongpilda panicked and grabbed Yusenga's hand. Senga, hold my hand. You must be scared. Yusenga blinked. I think you're more afraid than I am. And no, of course not. Even in the middle of the chaos, nobody could take him seriously. Lee Hyun-sung looked toward the frightened survivors. Will he be okay? Dokja glanced at the trembling man. He's too weak to betray us. But he won't be much help either. Don't worry about him. More importantly, are you really okay with coming with us, young Hee-won? Yusenga glanced at the injured woman. You haven't fully recovered yet. Hee-won shook her head. I'm more worried about Gil-young than myself. Everyone turned toward the boy. The deeper they traveled into the tunnels, the greater the danger would become. Are you sure you want him coming with us? I agree, Hee-won said. It isn't too late to send him back. Lee Hyun-sung looked uncomfortable. He might be in danger. Before anyone could continue, Hee-won crossed her arms. In case both of you forgot, the world changed a few days ago. She stared directly at them. Saying women and children are weaker than men is just prejudice now. In this world, anyone can become strong by increasing their stats. Dokja nodded. She wasn't wrong. Strength was no longer determined by age, size, or gender. The system had rewritten all of those rules. Gil-young, Dokja said. Show them. The boy stepped forward without hesitation. Then he crouched down and placed his hand against the ground. Tiny lights appeared around his fingertips. A glowing trail began winding along the railway tracks. The group watched in confusion as the strange light moved deeper into the tunnel. Then something appeared at the end of the trail. Oh my God, what is that? A cockroach. The insect paused briefly before continuing forward. Gil-young stood up. My attribute is Insect Collector. I can communicate with insects. A blue notification appeared. The character Lee Gil-young has activated the ability Diverse Communication. The others stared at him in disbelief. Even Dokja's companions hadn't fully grasped how valuable his ability was. Gil-young listened quietly for a moment. Then he spoke. There aren't any living creatures beyond this point. It's safe for the next 100 steps. The group fell silent. A skill like that could save lives. Gil-young looked up at Hee-won. Thank you for worrying about me. But I didn't come here to be protected. Hee-won blinked. Right? For a moment, nobody knew what to say. Then Yusenga frowned. By the way, I don't think those are all human corpses. Dokja's eyes narrowed. so she had noticed it too. The smell lingering in the tunnel wasn't just human blood. Something else was mixed into it. Yu Sanga touched the wall and peered into the darkness ahead. I can't see anything. It's like someone draped a black curtain over the tunnel. The atmosphere immediately grew heavier. At that exact moment, blue windows exploded into existence before everyone's eyes. A new sub-scenario has arrived. The expedition had barely begun, and already the railway tunnels were presenting their first challenge. A blue window materialized before the group. Second scenario, food acquisition. Category, sub. Difficulty, E. Clear conditions. Hunt down monsters and use them as food. Compensation, 500 coins. Failure, unknown. The moment the message disappeared, everyone's attention shifted to the massive corpses scattered across the tracks. They weren't human. The creatures resembled gigantic rats, their pale bodies covered in jagged spikes and ending in claws sharp enough to tear through flesh. A monster. Li Hyunsung swallowed hard. Dakja studied the carcasses carefully. Grade 9 underground species. Ground rats. Creatures that burrowed through tunnels and hunted in packs. They were among the first monsters to infest Seoul's subway system after the scenarios began. Normally, a group of ordinary survivors would struggle against even one of them. Yet dozens of corpses were piled across the tracks. Dakja narrowed his eyes. Only one person could have done this. Yu Jung-hyuk. The protagonist had clearly passed through here already. Yu Sanga looked between the corpses and the scenario window. Can't we use these as food to clear the scenario? Dakja shook his head. The scenario specifically says we have to hunt the monsters ourselves. So probably not. Tisk, that makes things complicated. The scenario wasn't interested in handing out free rewards. Everyone would have to earn their survival. Dakja stood and looked toward Young Hee-won. By the way, Hee-won, didn't you say you practice kendo? Hee-won scratched the back of her neck awkwardly. Well, calling myself good would be an exaggeration. A short time later, the group found themselves standing around a pile of monster bones. Using instructions Dakja remembered from Ways of Survival, they began turning the remains into crude weapons. Bone spears, bone blades, sharpened clubs, primitive but effective. Li Hyunsung lifted a spear and sighed. I feel like we've gone back to the Stone Age. Even Yu Sanga couldn't help smiling as she examined her weapon. These would work better if we sharpened them further. Try grinding the edges against rocks when you get the chance. Blue notifications appear before them. You have succeeded in creating weapons. Several constellations are interested in humanity's barbaric ingenuity. You have received 100 coins. The group stared at the rewards. So we can earn coins for things like this too? Dakja nodded. Do all of you have coins saved up? Everyone checked their status windows. Good. Invest them into strength, stamina, and agility. But don't spend everything. Keep enough to pay the survival cost. The atmosphere immediately became serious. Dakja's expression hardened. This may sound cruel, but I don't expect all of us to survive. No one spoke. The reality of the situation settled heavily over the group. Even so, Dakja continued, we do everything we can to stay alive. The silence that followed was broken by a low growl. Everyone froze. Green mist began leaking from the monster corpses. Then more growls echoed from deeper within the darkness. One pair of glowing eyes appeared. Then another, and another. Ground rats. Dozens of them. A blue message flashed before everyone. Sub-scenario. Food acquisition has begun. The hunt had started, and this time, they were no longer looking at dead monsters. The monsters were looking back. The battle exploded into chaos the moment the ground rats charged. Li Hyunsung stepped forward first. With a roar, he swung his crude bone club. The weapon smashed into a rat skull with a sickening crack. Blood sprayed across the tunnel as the creature collapsed. Another ground rat lunged from the side. Yu Sanga reacted instantly. She twisted away from its claws and swung her sharpened bone blade. The strike cut deep across the monster's neck. The creature screeched and staggered backward. Damn it, one got past me. Her warning came too late. A rat slipped through the front line and rushed toward the rear. Before anyone could react, a bone mace crashed downward. Lee Gil-young. The young boy brought the weapon down with all his strength. The ground rat's skull shattered beneath the blow. The impact echoed through the tunnel. Nearby, Jung Hee-won drove a sharpened bone spear straight into another monster's chest. The creature thrashed violently. Hee-won gritted her teeth and pushed harder. The spear punched deeper until the monster finally stopped moving. Blood covered the tracks. Broken monster corpses littered the ground. From the rear, Kim Dokja quietly observed the battlefield. It looked like everyone had fought surprisingly well. Better than he expected. The survivors had adapted quickly. Perhaps the constant threat of death was forcing them to evolve faster than normal. Is everyone okay? Dokja's voice echoed through the tunnel. One by one, the group checked themselves. Aside from scratches and bruises, nobody appeared seriously injured. Yu Sanga looked around at the pile of corpses. Dokja, just how many did you kill by yourself? 4. The answer stunned everyone. 4. That was more than anyone expected. Lee Hyun-sung scratched his head. I only got 2. I hunted 3. The moment Hyun-sung said it, Dokja glanced toward him in surprise. 3? That was far better than expected. Lee Hyun-sung couldn't hide his excitement. A smile spread across his face as he looked at the results of the battle. Even after spending a large amount of coins on his own growth, Kim Dokja realized that Hyun-sung's statistics had almost caught up to his. Curious, Dokja checked his information window. Lee Hyun-sung was 28 years old. His sponsor constellation was the Master of Steel. His private attribute was listed as Soldier who turned a blind eye to injustice. He possessed several combat-oriented skills, including bayonet skills, patience, sense of justice, and weapons training. Most importantly, his overall stats were already reaching impressive levels. The system even noted that the evolution of his attribute was approaching. His trust in Dokja had become extremely high. At the same time, the constellation supporting him seemed wary of Dokja's influence. Another detail immediately caught Dokja's attention. A starter pack had been applied. The starter pack was a special reward granted to incarnations whose average stats had not yet reached level 10. Besides increasing overall stats, it granted the useful skill weapons training. It was one of the most valuable early game advantages available. No wonder Hyun-sung had adapted so quickly. The Master of Steel clearly favored him. Meanwhile, Yu Sanga examined one of the ground rat corpses. How do we cook this? I don't think it can be eaten like this. You can't eat it right now, Dokja replied. But there will be a way later. The moment those words left his mouth, everyone stared at him. The atmosphere became awkward. Dokja suddenly realized he had answered far too naturally. From everyone else's perspective, there was no reason for him to know something like that. Oh, maybe he had revealed too much. Lee Hyun-sung finally voiced the question everyone was thinking. Dokja, do you perhaps know something we don't? The question hit directly. Dokja remembered how Yu Jung-hyuk handled situations like this in the novel. Sometimes he called it intuition. Other times he simply lied. As a reader, Dokja knew the best choice was often to avoid explaining anything at all. Before he could answer, a desperate scream echoed through the tunnel. Everyone turned. The bespectacled office worker had wandered too close to the edge of the tracks. A surviving ground rat burst from the darkness. Its claws wrapped around him. Save me. The monster dragged him away as he screamed in terror. Yu Sanga immediately rushed forward. Hold on to this. She grabbed his arm. For a moment, it looked like she might pull him back. But the ground rat's strength was overwhelming. The terrified man and Yu Sanga were both dragged across the tracks. The group watched in shock. Everything happened too quickly. Then suddenly, a tremendous force exploded through the tunnel. The ground rat's body slammed violently into the ground. Dust and debris erupted everywhere. Silence followed. Lee Hyun-sung stared with his hand stretched forward. The realization slowly dawned on everyone. I knew that guy would get into trouble. Lee Hyun-sung wondered if it was really all right to let the other two go off on their own with only Lee Gil-young. Kim Dokja explained that Gil-young's ability would help them track what they were looking for, then asked Lee Hyun-sung to take care of Jung Hee-won since she still hadn't fully recovered. Young Hee-won insisted she was fine, but after exchanging a brief glance with Lee Hyun-sung, the two decided to wait where they were. Kim Dokja reminded them that he would send a signal if anything happened. Holding Lee Gil-young's hand, Kim Dokja stepped into the place known as the Edge of Darkness, where the ground rats lived. It was a place that absorbed all light, making it impossible to distinguish the front, back, ceiling, or floor. Guided by Gil-young's diverse communication ability, the boy quietly led the way through the pitch-black tunnels, while Kim Dokja reflected that without that ability, he would have been forced to spend coins. As they walked deeper into the darkness, Lee Gil-young suddenly asked Kim Dokja if he had done it on purpose. Confused, the boy asked what he meant. Lee Gil-young brought up the moment when the ground rats dragged Han Myung-go and Yu Sang-go away, pointing out that Kim Dokja had deliberately chosen not to help them. Lee Gil-young admitted that he had been watching Kim Dokja's expression at the time and wanted to know why he had acted that way. Kim Dokja realized the boy had been observing him even amidst all the chaos, silently noting just how perceptive he was. Although one constellation disapproved of his cruelty, another urged him to explain. Deciding not to lie, Kim Dokja revealed that he hadn't helped them because of the ground rat's nature. They had a habit of storing their prey in the same place where they kept their treasures. Since the burrow paths were too complicated to trace normally, the only way to reach that location was by following the rats directly. He admitted that he had expected Han Myung-go to be taken, but he hadn't expected Yu Sang-ga to be dragged away as well. Lee Gil-young understood immediately and asked if Kim Dokja's true purpose had been to obtain the hidden items rather than simply rescuing them. Kim Dokja calmly admitted that it was, then asked if the boy was disappointed in him. Lee Gil-young answered with a simple no. Lee Gil-young smiled and told Kim Dokja that he hadn't lied. If Kim Dokja had truly been a bad person, he wouldn't have saved him back in the subway. With complete sincerity, the boy declared that he believed in him. At that moment, several constellations were moved to tears, and Kim Dokja received another 200 sponsored coins. Holding the boy's hand in silence, he realized that despite Lee Gil-young's maturity, he was still a child at heart. In a world like this, there were people who would gladly take advantage of such innocence. As Lee Gil-young announced that they were almost there, a few constellations watched with bated breath. After a brief silence, Lee Gil-young suddenly asked if Kim Dokja was the god of this world, or perhaps its main character. The unexpected question caught him completely off guard. Kim Dokja answered that he wasn't the main character and had always envied the true protagonist instead. Lee Gil-young accepted the answer, but pointed out that Kim Dokja still seemed to know an awful lot about this world. Kim Dokja simply admitted that he was right. Then Lee Gil-young asked another question. If they reached the end of every scenario, would they be able to make a wish? He reasoned that stories like this usually ended with some kind of reward. As he looked at the boy, Kim Dokja reflected that people adapted to this cruel world in different ways. Some lost their sanity. Some became fanatics. Others stubbornly clung to an irrational optimism. Grateful that the darkness hid his expression, he silently admitted that being cruel wasn't something he wanted, but it was something he had to become, so that this child could survive. As soon as they arrived, a notification announced that the sub-scenario had been updated. Moments later, another message appeared, informing them that they had entered the ground rat's treasure room. A glowing treasure chest sat in the middle of the cavern, but Kim Dokja immediately stopped Lee Gil-young, warning him that this wasn't an ordinary treasure trove. Before either of them could move, the sound of growling echoed through the cave. Ground rats surrounded the treasure from every direction, silently guarding it. Then another familiar voice rang out. Han Myung-go immediately blamed Yu Sang-ga for everything, shouting that if she hadn't insisted on taking the subway, none of this would have happened. Yu Sang-ga couldn't understand what riding the subway had to do with their situation, but Han Myung-go reminded her that she normally rode a bicycle. Realizing what he meant, Yu Sang-ga asked if he had been the one who stole her bike. Han Myung-go shamelessly admitted it, arguing that he had only wanted to drive her home in his car. He even insisted that when a rich boss offered someone a favor, they should simply accept it. Kim Dokja couldn't help thinking that this finally explained why someone wealthy enough to own a Mercedes-Benz had been riding the subway. The constellations watched the exchange with obvious disgust. Yu Sanga scolded Han Myungo, telling him that stealing was illegal, but he exploded in anger, claiming it didn't matter anymore and that she should have gotten into his car from the beginning. Even the constellations grew tired of the pointless argument. Watching from the shadows, Kim Dokja thought that he hadn't intended to reveal himself this early, but he no longer had a choice. Meanwhile, Han Myungo continued yelling across the cavern, demanding to know why Yu Sanga was making such a fuss when he had only offered to take her home in a friendly way. He blamed her for refusing him over and over, completely oblivious to the danger closing in around them. A massive spear suddenly shot through the cavern at incredible speed. Han Myungo barely had time to turn before it slammed into the wall just above him. The impact sent cracks racing across the cave, while a notification announced that the prisoner of the golden headband was pleased, rewarding Kim Dokja with another 100 coins. Han Myungo and Yu Sanga stared in shock, while Lee Gil-young immediately recognized who had thrown it. Kim Dokja stepped out from the shadows as he calmly thought to himself that it had finally begun. The spear shattered through the rocky wall, splitting the cavern apart. Cracks spread in every direction as pieces of stone rained down from above. The ground rats scattered in panic, fleeing from whatever was about to emerge, while Kim Dokja remained completely composed. Even within the edge of darkness, there was one place where dark ether gathered in overwhelming quantities. It was known as the core of the dark root, where black fire could exist. And wherever the dark root was located, the creature guarding it would inevitably reveal itself. The entire cavern shook violently as something enormous forced its way through the fractured earth. Wrapped in a dark cloak with writhing tentacles extending from its body, the monstrous being slowly emerged before everyone, towering over the treasure room. The moment the Dark Sentinel emerged, the system announced that a new sub-scenario had begun. Kill the Dark Sentinel. Lee Gil-young immediately felt sick from the overwhelming mental pressure. Kim Dokja realized the insects connected to Gil-young through diverse communication had all burst apart before dying, meaning the boy had already suffered severe psychological damage. He asked how many more times Gil-young could use the skill, and Gil-young admitted he could probably use it only once or twice more. Kim Dokja told him to stay back and rest. Meanwhile, the Dark Sentinel crawled toward its captives as Han Myungo desperately begged Kim Dokja to save him. Kim Dokja quietly pulled out a small blade and tested it against one of the dark root's branches. As soon as the blade touched it, the branch began dissolving. Just as he expected, this was the power of a demonic species. The creature before them was a grade 7 demon-type monster known as the Dark Sentinel. Unlike ordinary monsters, demon species were vastly more dangerous. The ground rat's treasure was actually a sacrificial offering prepared for these servants of the Demon King. Even monsters of the same grade couldn't compare to a demon. A notification suddenly appeared, announcing that the Dark Sentinel had received the favor of the Demon King it worshipped. Kim Dokja frowned. This situation wasn't good, and he wanted to avoid fighting it if possible. The Dark Sentinel spoke in an unfamiliar language, but Kim Dokja couldn't understand a single word. Moments later, the monster released the skill fear. A crushing wave of terror spread through the cavern, but the fourth wall immediately neutralized most of its effects, allowing Kim Dokja to remain standing while staring directly at the demon. The Dark Sentinel spoke once more as another notification confirmed that it had once again received the favor of the Demon King it worshipped.